Do you know this feeling? When one morning, around the age of 40, you walk up to the mirror and gaze into the tired eyes of a person you feel you don't know at all. On the surface, everything is in place. Career, family, home, everything you strived for, everything that was expected of you. But behind the polite, socially acceptable smile lies a resounding emptiness. The feeling that you are an actor in someone else's play, having played your part for too long and too well. And now it's intermission. The curtain falls, and you stand on an empty stage, not understanding who you are without the makeup and the memorized lines. Society calls this a midlife crisis, a frightening phrase, smelling of hopelessness, missed opportunities, and desperate attempts to reclaim youth. We are convinced that it's a pathology, a breakdown that needs to be urgently fixed, silenced with a new car, a new affair, a new job. But what if it isn't a breakdown? What if it's a call? The great Swiss psychologist Carl Gustav Jung, a man who descended into the darkest cellars of the human soul, argued that what we call a crisis is, in fact, an invitation. An invitation to the most important meeting of your life. A meeting with yourself. He called this process individuation, the transformation from a caterpillar, obediently crawling along a predetermined path, into a butterfly that finally spreads its true wings. This is not a crisis. This is a second birth. Painful, difficult, but the only one that makes life truly your own. Today, we will walk this path together. Step by step, we will explore the 5 stages of this great transformation as described by Jung. We won't use dry terminology. We will talk about what happens to your soul when it's tired of pretending and demands the truth. This is not just information. This is a map of your inner world. And if you make it to the end, you will understand that fear is merely the shadow cast by the mountain you are destined to climb to see the dawn of your own, authentic life for the first time. The first stage of this journey begins with a barely perceptible whisper. Comes not from the outside, but from within. This is the stage of awakening. It usually occurs between the ages of 40 and 45. According to Jung, the entire first half of life is dedicated to adapting to the external world. We study, build a career, start a family, earn status. We build a strong, beautiful facade for the house of our life. And then, when the house is built, furnished, and everyone around is applauding, you suddenly hear a quiet but persistent knock. And this knock comes from within. It is the voice of the part of you that you sacrificed for success and stability. The very part that wanted to paint as a child, not become a lawyer. The one that dreamed of traveling, not of a mortgage. The one that wanted deep, real intimacy, not just status relationships. At this stage of awakening, things that once brought satisfaction suddenly become bland. A promotion at work no longer brings joy. An expensive purchase brings only fleeting relief. Social rituals and empty talk begin to cause an almost physical revulsion. A vague but all-pervading feeling of this isn't it arises. Life feels flat, two-dimensional. You can be lying in bed next to a seemingly loved one and feel infinitely lonely. You can be sitting in an important meeting, reaping the rewards of your success, and feel like an imposter. This is not depression in the clinical sense. Jung called it the voice of the self. The self is our true center, our wholeness, who we were born to be before the world started molding us into what was convenient for it. And now this inner center begins to send signals. It says, hey, you've built a magnificent house, but it's not for you. You've forgotten about its most important resident. Outwardly, this can manifest in various ways. Unexplained fatigue, even after a long sleep. Loss of interest in former hobbies. A sharp sense of the fleetingness of time and the question, what am I spending my remaining years on? A person begins to ask themselves existential questions. Who am I really? What is the meaning of my life? Am I truly happy? The concept of the persona, or social mask, plays a key role here. For the entire first half of life, we polish our persona, the mask of a successful professional, a good parent, a reliable friend. We merge with it so completely that we begin to believe we are this mask. The awakening is the moment when the mask begins to crack. It takes more and more energy to maintain it, and it brings less and less satisfaction. You feel like you are suffocating beneath it. This is a very vulnerable period. Many, frightened by this inner emptiness, rush into external changes. They buy a sports car, start an affair, move to another country. They try to fix the facade, not understanding that the problem lies in the foundation. Jung warned that such attempts are merely a postponement. The soul demands not new decorations, but a major overhaul from within. The main task at this stage is not to run, but to stop and listen, to admit, yes, something is wrong. Yes, I don't feel joy. Yes, I am confused. This admission is the first step toward healing. It is the moment when you stop ignoring the knock from within and decide to crack open the door to the unexplored rooms of your own house. Because it is there, in those dusty and forgotten rooms, that what can bring the taste back to your life is stored. It is a painful, frightening, but absolutely necessary stage. It is the call to an adventure on which your entire future depends. And when you answer it, you move to the next, even deeper level, the level of reassessment. If the awakening was a quiet whisper from the soul, then the second stage, which Jung identified as occurring roughly from 45 to 50 years of age, is a loud and honest conversation with oneself. This is the stage of reassessment. Here, it is no longer enough to just feel that something is wrong. Here, the psyche demands that you take a lantern and mercilessly illuminate every corner of your life's house, especially those you were afraid to look into for decades. At this stage, a person, metaphorically speaking, sits down at the negotiating table with their own life. On one side of the table is their ego, the part of the personality that built a career, achieved goals, and created a reputation. On the other side is their soul, or the self, which has been patiently waiting all these years for its turn. And the soul asks the ego very uncomfortable questions. You built this magnificent house, but are you happy in it? You earned all this money, but what can you buy with it that truly matters? You've surrounded yourself with people, but with which of them can you be absolutely honest, vulnerable, real? The ideals you fought for in your 20s, are they still yours? Or are you just running on inertia? This is a period of total revision. Everything is reconsidered. Career, relationships, friendships, values, dreams. A person begins to see the chasm between who they have become and who they could have been. And this chasm causes pain. It is not just regret. It is an existential angst. Thoughts like, what if I had chosen a different profession? Why did I spend so many years in a relationship with no real intimacy? I've spent my whole life doing what I should, but when will I do what I want? Become obsessive. It is at this stage that one of Jung's most important concepts comes into play, the shadow. The shadow is not evil. It is everything we have repressed from our consciousness because we considered it bad, unacceptable, or weak. Our anger, our envy, our laziness, our inconvenient desires, our vulnerability. All of this is stored in the basement of our personality, in the shadow. And in the first half of life, we spend a colossal amount of energy to keep the door to this basement tightly shut. But at the stage of reassessment, the door is torn from its hinges. And everything you tried so hard to hide begins to come to light. You, always so calm and proper, suddenly start experiencing fits of irrational anger. You, such a devoted family person, suddenly catch yourself thinking about forbidden affairs. You, a successful achiever, suddenly feel an overwhelming desire to drop everything and do nothing. This is frightening. It feels as if you are going mad, that your personality is disintegrating. But Jung argued that this is a healing process. Your psyche is trying to restore its wholeness. It is telling you, you cannot be only light. To become whole, you must also acknowledge your darkness. Integrating the shadow is the key task of the second half of life. It means to stop judging yourself for wrong feelings and thoughts and to start exploring them. To ask yourself, what is my anger telling me? What need of mine is it protecting? What is my envy whispering about? What unfulfilled desire of mine is it highlighting? The process of reassessment is a time when people often make radical moves. They leave a prestigious job to open a small pottery studio. They end long-term but toxic relationships. They change their social circle. But these external changes are merely a consequence of deep inner work. The person no longer wants to live according to others' expectations. They begin to listen to their inner voice. It is also a period of confronting the reality of aging and finitude. If in youth, time seemed like an infinite resource, now its value is felt acutely. The body begins to send signals that can no longer be ignored, and this forces a shift in focus from external achievements to the internal quality of life. Instead of collecting acquaintances, a person begins to value the depth of a few true connections. Instead of chasing material wealth, they seek meaning and spiritual fulfillment. It is a painful but liberating process. It's like a spring cleaning of a house where for years you didn't dare to sort through the clutter. You find forgotten things, throw out useless junk, and the house has fewer objects but more air. You stop deceiving yourself. You see your mistakes, your illusions, your self-imposed limitations. And this gives you a chance to live the second half of your life not as you should, but as your soul wants. This is a time when you stop looking for answers in the external world and start finding them within. You might get into meditation, psychology, philosophy, or art. You seek what nourishes your soul, not your ego. And when this internal reassessment is complete, when you have bravely faced your shadow and acknowledged your true desires, you are ready for the next stage, establishing a new equilibrium. A stage where you begin to build your life anew, but on a completely different, solid foundation. After the storm of reassessment and the painful encounter with one's own shadow, comes the third creative stage. Jung assigned it the age of 50 to 55, but of course these boundaries are flexible. This is a time of establishing equilibrium. If in the previous stage we were dismantling the old house brick by brick, now we begin to build a new one. But not on the sand of social expectations, but on the firm ground of our authentic self. This equilibrium does not mean passivity or the end of development. On the contrary, it is the discovery of an inner compass that allows one to move through life confidently and calmly, without the previous fuss and anxiety. The chaos of internal conflict subsides, and in its place comes a deep understanding of who you are and what kind of life you want to live. The key word for this period is balance. It is the search for harmony between the opposites that previously tore you apart. First, there is the balance between the external and the internal. If the first half of life was a race for external attributes, success, status, money, now the internal state takes precedence. The question, how does this look to others, is replaced by the question, how do I really feel? A person understands that it's possible to have everything others dream of and still be unhappy. And it's possible to live a simple, modest life but feel a deep inner fullness. Success is no longer measured by the size of a bank account or a job title on a business card. It is measured by the level of inner peace, joy, and meaningfulness. This does not mean that one renounces the material world. It means that the material ceases to be an end in itself and becomes merely a tool for achieving inner well-being. Second, there is the balance between work and life. At 50, many people, especially those who have built successful careers, realize the price they paid for it. They sacrifice time with family, health, and hobbies. Now comes the understanding that life is not just about work. A person begins to consciously set aside time for what nourishes their soul. For hobbies abandoned in youth, for connecting with nature, for aimless travel, for simply doing nothing. They learn to find pleasure not in achievement, but in the process. Third, there is the balance between should and want. Social obligations and a sense of duty, which previously dominated, give way to personal values. A person learns to say no to what depletes them, even if it might disappoint someone. They leave toxic relationships, reduce contact with people who drain their energy. They begin to establish their boundaries not out of selfishness, but out of deep self-respect. They understand that their primary duty is to their own soul. Fourth, and perhaps most importantly, is the balance between the masculine and feminine principles within oneself, or as Jung called them, the animus and anima. In the first half of life, we often suppress one of these parts for the sake of social adaptation. Men have to suppress their sensitivity, intuition, and emotionality, the anima, to be strong and successful. Women often have to suppress their rationality, will, and drive for self-realization, the animus, to fit the role of the hearthkeeper. In the second half of life, the psyche strives for integration. A man discovers within himself the capacity for empathy, creativity, and deep emotional connections. He might start crying while watching a movie or take up poetry, and this no longer seems like a sign of weakness to him, but rather a sign of wholeness. A woman, in turn, discovers her inner strength, the ability to stand up for her interests, to realize her projects. She is no longer afraid of being inconvenient or too strong. She finds her inner core. This union of masculine and feminine within creates an incredibly harmonious and attractive personality. At this stage, a person begins to shed the excess. Not just things, but also unnecessary worries, superficial connections, and exhausting habits. A desire for simplicity emerges. Life becomes less eventful but more meaningful. A person prefers to spend an evening with a single book rather than scrolling through hundreds of social media posts. They choose a deep conversation with one friend over a noisy party. This is a time when the foundation for the next stage, wisdom, is laid. A person no longer just knows what is good for them and what is bad. They feel it with their entire being. They live in harmony with their inner rhythm. They have stopped fighting with life. They have learned to dance with it. And this dance, calm, confident, and beautiful, becomes a source of inspiration not only for themselves but for everyone around them. Life ceases to be a problem to be solved. It becomes a mystery to be lived. And living this mystery with a newfound equilibrium opens the way to true wisdom. Once inner equilibrium is achieved, a person enters the fourth, most fertile period of their life, which can be called the stage of deepening wisdom. The age ranges here are even more fluid. It can begin at 55, 60, or even later. This is a time when life experience ceases to be just a collection of memories and crystallizes into something much greater, wisdom. Wisdom, in Jung's understanding, is not erudition or the number of books read. It is the ability to see life in its entirety, to understand the deep connections between events, and to accept reality as it is, without illusions or resistance. It is a quiet, clear, and calm strength. At this stage, a fundamental shift in the perception of time occurs. If in youth, time seemed like an enemy to be outrun or a resource to be spent efficiently, now it becomes an ally. A person becomes aware of the transience of life, but this awareness no longer causes fear or panic. On the contrary, it gives value to every moment. The desire to rush somewhere, to achieve something, to prove something to someone fades away. In its place comes the art of being. Simply being here and now. Enjoying the taste of morning coffee, the warmth of a sunbeam on one's face, a quiet conversation with a loved one. Life ceases to be a race and becomes a meditation. Along with this, the attitude towards one's own ego changes. If the ego was once a dictator demanding victories and recognition, it now becomes a wise advisor. The person lets go of the need to always be right. They no longer engage in pointless arguments, no longer try to persuade everyone who disagrees with them. They understand that everyone has their own truth and their own path. This gives rise to a deep tolerance for other people and their imperfections. Relationships with others also reach a new level. Superficial connections fall away on their own because there is no longer time or energy for them. What remains are those who are truly important. But even in these deep relationships, the need for control or possession disappears. Love becomes not a demand, but a gift. A person loves another not for what they are given, but simply for who they are. They are able to give the other person the freedom to be themselves, even if it is not always convenient or pleasant. The most important thing that happens at this stage is the transformation of one's role in the world. They cease to be just a consumer of life experience and become its conduit. The accumulated wisdom seeks an outlet. The person wants to share. But this is not intrusive mentoring or lecturing. It is a desire to pass on their experience, to support those who are just beginning their journey. This is why at this age many people become excellent mentors, teachers, and counselors. They might raise grandchildren, passing on not just knowledge, but a life philosophy. They might mentor young colleagues at work. They might start writing memoirs, engaging in creative pursuits, or volunteering. They do this not for fame or money, but out of an inner need to contribute to life, to leave behind something more than just material possessions. Jung called this the archetype of the wise old man or the wise old woman. This is a person who has not just lived a long life, but has understood its laws. During this period, the final acceptance of one's own shadow also occurs. The person no longer fights with their dark sides. They have learned to negotiate with them. They understand that their anger is a source of strength, their sadness a source of depth, their fears pointers to where they need to grow. They accept themselves completely, with all their flaws and contradictions. And this complete, unconditional self-acceptance grants them incredible inner peace. They learn to rejoice in simple things they previously overlooked. They find beauty in imperfection. They see the divine in the ordinary. Their worldview becomes broader, more compassionate. They begin to feel themselves not as a separate, isolated unit, but as part of something vast, part of nature, part of the universe, part of the infinite flow of life. Physical aging is no longer perceived as a tragedy. The body may grow weaker, but the spirit grows stronger. The dynamism and energy of youth give way to calmness and deep understanding. The person understands that true beauty is not in the smoothness of the skin, but in the light that shines from within. This is the stage at which a person reaches the peak of their personal development. They have resolved their major internal conflicts. They have found their place in the world. They have learned to love themselves and others. They are no longer afraid of life and no longer afraid of death. They simply live, and their very life becomes a work of art, quiet, wise, and incredibly beautiful. And this brings us to the final, concluding stage, integration and leaving a legacy. Beginning of the fifth, final part. And finally, we arrive at the last stage of this great journey, which Jung saw as occurring from the age of 70 onwards. This is the stage of legacy and integration. If the previous stages were about building and finishing your inner temple, this is the time when you simply live in it, and the very light shining from its windows becomes your main message to the world. At this stage, there is no longer a need to win victories, achieve goals, or prove one's identity. All worldly hustle, all ambitions and anxieties of the ego recede to the background, giving way to a deep, silent, and holistic experience of being. This is the pinnacle of individuation, where the person fully integrates with their past, present, and future, accepting their life as a single, meaningful tapestry. The key process here is the acceptance of one's complete life story. The person looks at their past no longer as a chain of mistakes and achievements, but as the only correct path that led them to themselves. Every fall, every disappointment, every pain is now seen not as a flaw, but as a necessary lesson. They understand that without these dark valleys, they would never have been able to appreciate the height of their mountains. Regrets completely disappear. In their place comes a deep gratitude for all experience, because it was this experience that forged them into who they are. A sense of completion emerges. Nothing needs to be fixed anymore. Nothing was in vain. Everything happened exactly as it was meant to. During this period, the person reaches a full reconciliation with the idea of death. The fear of finality, which had subconsciously haunted them all their life, gives way to calm acceptance. Death is no longer seen as a terrible end, as a defeat. It is perceived as a natural and integral part of the life cycle, as a return home, as a transition to another state. Just as a seed must die to become a tree, and a caterpillar to become a butterfly, so the individual consciousness prepares for its final transformation. This understanding liberates from the last and deepest fear, granting the person great inner peace and true freedom. Their legacy is not what they leave behind in the form of money or property. Their main legacy is the quality of their presence. It is the wisdom that shines through in their silent smile. It is the peace that people feel just by being near them. It is the love that manifests not in words, but in an understanding gaze. They become a living embodiment of the values they acquired on their path. They no longer need to teach others. They teach by their very existence. They do not give advice. They simply are. And this being becomes a more powerful guide for others than any instruction. Emotionally, the person reaches a state close to enlightenment. All internal conflicts are completely resolved. grudges, old wounds, claims against the world. All have dissolved in the ocean of all-encompassing acceptance. They have learned to be alone, but it is no longer loneliness, but a fulfilling solitude. Silence ceases to be frightening. On the contrary, it becomes their best friend, a space where they feel their inseparable connection with all that is. They no longer try to control life. They trust it completely. They do not make plans for the future or cling to the past. They live in the pure present moment, and each moment is full and self-sufficient for them. They feel their life not as their personal property, but as a gift entrusted to them for a time, and they treat this gift with the utmost reverence. That is why, as Carl Jung said, life truly begins at 40, because it is from this age that the long but blessed journey home to oneself begins. The path from the social mask to the authentic face, from struggle to acceptance, from anxiety to peace, from fragmentation to wholeness. The midlife crisis is not a disease to be cured. It is the call of a soul tired of lies. And those who find the courage to answer this call find something priceless at the end of the road: themselves. They do not just live life. They become life itself, in its wise, calm, and eternal flow. The path we have described today is not an easy walk. It is an ascent. At times, it requires the courage to face your fears. At times, the patience to wait out a storm. At times, the humility to let go of what you have held onto for so long. But every drop of sweat, every tear on this path pays off 100-fold. Because the prize at the end of this journey is not something external. It is you, real, whole, and free. If you are now at that point which the world calls a crisis, do not be afraid. You are not breaking. You are awakening. Listen to that inner call. It may lead you to the most unexpected places, but in the end, it always leads you home. If this journey has resonated with your soul, write just 2 words in the comments: second birth. Let this become your intention, your first step on the path to yourself. Thank you for walking this path with us. Don't forget to subscribe so we can continue to explore the deepest mysteries of the human soul together. Until next time.